Tom Brady seeking out Lamar Jackson after the game to tell him that he had a great game on Sunday night. Oh, and he did. And it's one of those games, Peter, Sims and I talked about this yesterday. When you look at Lamar Jackson's stats, they don't scream out great game. 163 passing yards, 61 rushing yards. Okay, fine. But when you consider the plays he made, when he made them, and the impact that he had on the Patriots defense and the ability to win the game by 17 points, it was a huge game for Lamar Jackson. It was an MVP type of a game for the second-year quarterback.
You know, we've fallen in love so much with stats, Mike, and in saying what somebody's rating was. And look, Russell Wilson's numbers were absurd. 378, 5 touchdowns, no picks, and I think he's the front runner right now for the MVP. But Lamar Jackson is close, and he did play an MVP type game. And Mike, afterwards, I found him, talked to him a little bit at his locker away from the scrum. Mike Silver and Jarrett Bell and I got him alone for a little while. And the one thing that really impressed me about Lamar Jackson is he plays so well, at these very, very big moments. But I'm going to read you the quote that really impressed me the most about Lamar Jackson. I don't really care about the person I'm playing against. I don't care if it's a primetime game or we're playing at 1 o'clock. I'm just trying to win at the end of the day. And you say, okay, spout the cliches, all that. But the guys in that locker room say that is the essence of Lamar Jackson. You got a game. You got a game, and Bill Parcells used to say, "I want guys who want to play Sunday if the stadium's closed and the game's in the Paramus Mall parking lot." And that's what Lamar Jackson is. He's a ball player, and I just walking through that locker room. There's none of this. There's none of this divided team. There is this team that feels like Lamar Jackson, this 22-year-old kid, is our leader, and we love him.
And let me take that and apply a twist to it, because there's another team that wears purple who has a quarterback who is hyper-aware of the circumstances surrounding any given game. And if it's a big game, all of a sudden, the passes start sailing 4 feet over the heads of the open receivers. If it's not a big game, that pass is right between the numbers, and that's Kirk Cousins. Lamar Jackson, for the same reason that he embraces and would love to play a game in the parking lot at the mall, he also is unaffected. He's unflustered by a big game. That's the kind of game on a Sunday night against the Patriots that would freak you out. Any other quarterback, especially Kirk Cousins, didn't affect Lamar Jackson at all, and I think that's a big part of his greatness.
No question at all, Mike. He was, we gave him a couple of chances to say, "Oh my God, Tom Brady, you just beat the great Brady." And he was having none of it. He said, "Hey, look, that's the GOAT. That's the greatest. But I don't really care. I can't care." And I think the one thing that I was thinking about this walking out of the stadium that night, that what an incredible day this must have been for him. But also, Mike, how about the son of Massachusetts, Eric DeCosta, grew up a few miles from Foxborough, grew up loving the Patriots. All of his friends and everybody back home still love the Patriots, and he has helped build a team now that might be every bit the equal of the Patriots, and beat them Sunday night. But if you're in that position, you're in the Lamar Jackson position, you can't sit back and say, "Hey, man, I choreographed a team that beat the great Belichick," or "Man, I beat Brady tonight." You just can't think that way. You got to think, I'm their peer. I'm on their level. Now let's go out and compete. And I think that's precisely what Lamar Jackson's attitude is.
And you mentioned DeCosta. He's the guy that worked the draft board to get Lamar Jackson. And as I recall what I had heard back at the time Jackson was drafted, Steve Bisciotti, the owner of the team, and they say, "Oh, the owners aren't involved in the draft." Yes, yeah. When it comes to quarterbacks, the owner's always got an opinion. The question is, do you pay attention to it or do you not? Bisciotti wanted Jackson the middle of the round, and Bisciotti was persuaded to be patient, that they could play this out, and they traded down, and then they traded up, and they swoop in, and they get Lamar Jackson at number 32, and they were ecstatic. And, I remember at the time, people were just like, hey, Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold and Josh Allen and Josh Rosen, and Lamar Jackson. Like, nobody really knew what to make of Lamar Jackson. And nobody thought, Peter, that he would play at the NFL level the way he played at the college level, because it was Louisville. And they're playing a bunch of overmatched defenses. And sure, he can run around those guys. He's not going to run around and throw the ball like he did when he's facing NFL caliber defenses. Well, just like Deshaun Watson stepped up to the next level and became better, relatively speaking, it looks like Lamar Jackson's in the process of doing the same damn thing.
Mike, I think going back to the draft, the Baltimore Ravens were ready for a clear challenge to Joe Flacco at quarterback. They'd kind of moved on mentally a little bit from Joe. And I think that Lamar Jackson became that guy in that draft who they wanted at the right value in that draft to try to basically say, Joe Flacco, now you've got a challenger. And if you're not clearly better, we're going to go with the kid, which is exactly what they did. Two other quick points. I think that the Cincinnati Bengals picking in the 20s, I kept saying that year, take Lamar Jackson, take Lamar Jackson. They took Billy Price, the center guard from Ohio State, who can't even win a starting job cleanly. And the second thing I'll tell you, Mike, being in that stadium on Sunday night, the Ravens had gotten kind of stale 2 and 3 and 4 years ago, and they really got beat up by their fans for some of their players kneeling. Remember that game in London against Jacksonville where a lot of their players kneeled in support of Colin Kaepernick? Their fans were furious at that. And I just think it led to a little bit of a disconnect between the Ravens and their fans. And the Ravens, as I say, got stale. That was a different crowd on Sunday night, Mike. There were a lot of African Americans in and around the stadium. There was one guy right in front of the press box. The press box in Baltimore is low. And one guy wore a huge and profane Lamar Jackson sweatshirt. He stood in front of the press box, held up the sweatshirt, went like this with him so we could read his sweatshirt. And I kind of nodded and I said, I get it. You love Lamar. That crowd loves Lamar Jackson. And I think it was desperately needed on and off the field for the Ravens.
I'm trying to envision what the profane sweat. I assume that there was a middle name that was given to Lamar Jackson that began
correct.
with F.
There was Lamar Jackson with a seven letter middle name. Mike, you're absolutely right.
Lamar Francis Jackson, ladies and gentlemen.
That's exactly what it was.
He said after the draft, when he went number 32 overall, they're going to get a Super Bowl out of me, and he's had that confidence all along, and off they go. Even when they had Joe, and I remember how awkward it was for Joe Flacco. He knew what was coming, and it came. And now Lamar Jackson, MVP candidate, taking the league by storm and knocking off the Patriots. Peter,
Mike, there's one other point I want to make on this. Sometimes I bet initially Lamar Jackson felt like, oh my God, 31st pick, all these quarterbacks getting picked ahead of me. I mean, Josh Rosen, 22 picks ahead of me. And I don't get this sense that Lamar Jackson felt, oh my God, this is awful. I always got the sense, man, I'm lucky I went to a good team. And every time, he's like, and I'm not comparing him to Dan Marino other than in position of the draft. Dan Marino got to be drafted by a good team because people had questions about him coming out of Pitt. And I look at this as almost the same thing. For Lamar Jackson, it's a blessing that he went 32nd, in my opinion, because you're going to a team that has a lot of pieces already in place and that is proven over and over again that through analytics and through the ability like compensatory picks, they know how to run a modern NFL franchise. I doubt he knew any of this on the day of the draft, but he sure does know it now.
Just a few weeks ago, it could be argued that the Ravens weren't as good as 4-2 would have indicated. They had a close home win against the Bengals, a close home win against the Cardinals. They lost at home to the Browns. Then here we go. At Seattle, they win by 14. They take down the Patriots by 17, and they're right up there at the upper echelon of the NFL.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.